Hi, I'm Nate Speare. I'm a practicing astrologer and storyteller and researcher, and I'd like to give you a little bit of a forecast for the cosmic weather that's going to be happening this week. And then I'm also going to be offering you a short guided body-mind meditation to sort of cap off the forecast. So last week we had a lot of sort of spontaneous, raw, emotional information coming into us about our desires and our wounds, right? What was pulling us toward it, especially in our partnerships, and also any sense of wounding that might have been coming up. And there was a sense that these things might have flooded us, but they could also very well have worked harmoniously. There was supportive energy there. And we also had the full moon occurring in Aries. So there was a little bit of a push and pull between our own drive and our own desire versus our inclination to cooperate and sort of behave in an appropriate manner with the world and in a harmonious, collaborative manner. And we also had the moon conjunct Uranus, which is that speedy sort of electrical revolutionary energy, which I had said in last week's forecast, if you'll recall, brings sudden change. That's, doesn't have to be sudden change in a situation, although it very often is. But it's at the very least sudden change in our emotional state and in our energetic sort of push toward things. And so now this week, one of the things that it's important coming out of that full moon to keep in mind was not to be fooled by that sudden change, that sudden doesn't necessarily equal profound. So this is especially key as we're moving forward because into Scorpio season, because the true change that occurs is slow and deep and subtle. And in fact, the whole motto for this coming week coming up could be said to be that old philosophical maxim, make haste slowly. So we're feeling the profound transformations on a deeper and slower ongoing level, and it can feel a little bit this week that's coming up like we're sort of being launched, but at the same time that we're propelling forward, we're also like but something's holding us back. Like, so it's not quite, we're like going towards something, but it's not that we can get there instantly in 1, 2, or 3 steps. So make haste slowly. We're also sort of getting the opportunity to gather that raw emotional information about desires, things magnetizing us and attracting us, also a sense of wounding. We're bringing together, gathering all that spontaneous, raw, emotional information. We get the opportunity this week to sort of transmute it into a sense of grounded goal setting and goal following, and also a more expansive perspective around all of that raw emotional material coming up. So this is part of the preparation of going into when the sun enters Scorpio next weekend. We're kind of getting there. It's this sort of it's a kind of interplay between light and dark as we gather that information and sort of look at it in the context of a sort of more mind-oriented vision or sense of a sort of mental, sometimes intellectual perspective on all that raw material. So it's kind of not too light, not too dark, not too speedy, but also not too slow. It's sort of somewhere in the middle there. But a big way that we're being prepared to enter Scorpio season next weekend is that in the middle of the week, we're going to have a conjunction, so kind of like 2 planets shackled together between Mars, the pioneer and also the warrior, and Pluto, the lord of the underworld and the lord of transformation and instincts and sex and death and rebirth. So we got these two very important planets conjoined, leading us into Scorpio season, which is very important because Mars and Pluto themselves are both the co-rulers of Scorpio. But when they're up against each other right now, or conjoined together, it's happening in the sign of Capricorn, which is a kind of grounded, earthy energy, and Capricorn involves boundaries and structure. So Mars happens to be the warrior, the pioneer, happens to be exalted and functioning greatly in the sign of Capricorn. So the greatest thing about Mars in this sign is really the power to persevere. So we have a sense this week that we're persevering strongly toward long-term goals. And Mars energy can be sometimes warlike, it can sometimes be aggressive, sometimes violent. But in the conjunction with Pluto, even if the emotion behind that can be dark and intense, Pluto is kind of trying to rein in Mars and say, well, let's plan, let's prioritize, let's strategize. So there's a sort of hunger for strategy this week that we're trying to go towards. And since they're in Capricorn, that sense of boundaries and structure is really asking about, are the current structures in place in my life aligned with my ambitions? Are the current structures that are in place in my life aligned with the ways that I'm moving forward and transforming? Because if not, then those structures we may find very much are sort of organically shifting on their own accord, and we also might have a sort of restlessness to shift them. And what tends to happen is that, especially with Pluto, that big deity and planet of transformation, or rather we should say technically small planet, but in any case, big power, big energy there, moving through the sign of boundaries is really, we can see whatever Pluto touches, it transforms. So moving through Capricorn, all about boundaries, there's a sense right now that we either want to totally dismantle the status quo and sort of deconstruct all of the structures that are in place in our lives, or that we find ourselves sort of insecurely holding on to the status quo and trying to maintain structures even if they're kind of outmoded. And we can all, and the key is not to judge this when this happens, just to sort of notice, am I really holding on to a container that I thought was really important for me, but that it might actually not be? It might be a false sense of security or cocoon. Or the other way around, am I like totally tearing things down and taking for granted, the kind of good things about this boundary or this kind of space that I've had in my life? And I mean, we see this kind of dichotomy in all kinds of different situations right now. We can see it happening with our political situation. We can see politicians on both sides of the aisle really, the so-called establishment politicians trying really hard to maintain the integrity of establishment and of structures that are in place. But it's kind of, it seems that it's trying to insecurely be reinforced because it's kind of mutating and really transforming on a profound level. And also on the other side, we can see that even though people seem very anti-establishment and sort of overthrow everything, that they're trying to insecurely maintain certain values that are kind of becoming outmoded as we shift into these new energetic moments. So we can see people trying to cling on to power and trying to cling on to structures that might have outworn their usefulness. And clinging on to power is the big, that's the big thing that we want to sort of catch ourselves and just notice and make with a sense of friendliness and gentleness toward ourselves, breathe in and out when that happens. And know that whether we have a sense of power or not, we can experience a sense of contentment just by being completely where we are, even if that state is totally embarrassed, totally vulnerable, totally uncertain. In fact, one of the greatest definitions of power, true power, that I was ever given was, power is letting go of my need to control and manifesting the creativity of my wild man or wild woman. And so that's a great sort of statement, I think, to contemplate and soak in as we move forward into the week. What is the true sense of power? And along with this, we might feel, with this shadowy side of Mars and Pluto and Capricorn, along with persevering towards goals, that when we feel frustrated that things aren't happening, because we live in such a sort of quick, instant gratification culture, right? Everything at our fingertips. That we might be raging against ourselves or beating ourselves up for not pursuing things or not getting things as quickly as we can, right? That's actually in Buddhism, they call that the jealous gods realm, that there's a world that's full of promising pleasure out there, and we're punishing ourselves for not being as diligent about going out and getting that pleasure, right? But it's really, really important to touch into that state of being with a sense of compassion toward ourselves and toward others, so that we don't really, either get really self-aggressive with that rage, or we don't lash out at people that we love based on it. Because Mars and Pluto, that's a potent cocktail. That's both the unconscious, and it's also drive and passion. So the most important thing is that we notice those feelings, can sort of feel them circulating through our bodies, and not enclose and harden ourselves inside of them, especially when there are obstacles, because there will be obstacles this week that present themselves. And quite frequently, obstacles are actually preparations. So we need to see obstacles when they happen as preparation and lesson, rather than as setbacks. Because if we enclose ourselves into this energy of rage and self-aggression, then what happens is we're totally closed off to the opportunities that are right around the corner and to the loving connections that are right around the corner. A great mentor told me that an opportunity can look like a crisis if we're not prepared for it. Or an opportunity can feel like a crisis when we're not ready and open to receive it. So that's why it's important to notice our rage, let it go through, but also not to enclose and harden inside of it, because that's what will close to the opportunity that's right in the next breath, to connect, to love, to work, right? So staying open through all of that is very important. And what is happening more behind the scenes is that we're getting supportive energy from Jupiter, the broad-minded planet of wisdom, and the panoramic, ruler that's able to see optimistically and see 360 degrees. And Venus, goddess of love, of the five senses, or of more than the five senses, you could say, beauty, magnetism. Both Jupiter and Venus they're in mutual reception, because Venus is moving into Sagittarius. So they're both kind of feeding each other, and they're both giving us supportive energy to persevere in our goal setting. So if we're feeling stuck, we might look at our partnerships, because that's one of the things that Venus rules, and also our intelligent ability to see the bigger picture, because that's what Jupiter's all about. So when we're looking for support for persevering in goal setting and following through with our goals, we look to partnerships of all kinds, sensory experiences, and panoramic 360-degree awareness, the ability to see the bigger picture of the situation and to take the longer view, not get lost in micromanaging details. So, and we never know. This week we have a sort of balancing act between Venus and the moon happening. So what might happen, since Venus is one of the things Venus is all about, not just partnerships, but the senses. If we're too much in a cocoon of sort of pseudo-security, Venus might make some vivid sights, sounds, touches, tastes, or smells open up our sensory life to kind of wake us up. And in doing that, Venus is kind of pulling us toward a less comfortable container. It's definitely less comfortable, feels less secure, but might be more appropriate for the paths that each of us are on. So all of this is really preparing us for the sun to enter Scorpio and to have a kind of really a creative relationship with our psyche and with our shadows even and with our unconscious. So at this point, I would like to offer you a somatic body-mind meditation. Somatic is really just a word for that means first-person experience of the body. And do not worry about doing this incorrectly. This is purely for your experience and your relationship with your own body. I encourage you to get up on your feet and do it, but I'm going to be in the chair for the purposes of the video. And what we're going to work with is we're going to work with the lymphatic fluid. As a transition from the full moon, which the full moon is associated with all of the fluid in the body, toward this sort of boundary setting and structure examining and goal examining energy of Mars and Pluto this week. So what we're going to do is, this involves the heart, the lymphatic fluid, which is the fluid that, in short, a short way of explaining it is empties into the veins that empty into the heart. So it's basically fluid that, if you take your hand and place your attention on your fingertips and move your attention all the way down your arm through your elbow over to your heart, it's fluid that moves from the outer extreme of our body, of our fingers, to emptying into the heart, and it really moves in that direction. So the way we're going to start is simply feeling our heart, resting our attention purely on the way the heart is feeling and breathing, not needing to change that, just staying with it. We're going to take our right hand, direct our attention gently toward our fingers and to the life in our fingers. We feel any blood, tingling, or circulation. And we're going to do a little bit of movement that, when we're doing this movement, I invite you to sort of keep your attention sort of between the heart, which has to do with clarity of feeling and clarity of presence, and the outer direction of the hand, which has to do with, it's a kind of gesture of warriorship, of bravery, and also of setting boundaries and setting directions. So, heart to hand. Heart, and even when I move my hand out, I'm not losing connection to the heart, to feeling the heart. The heart is always present, which means the chest is a little bit like lifted and open. Heart to hand. And we're going to take one hand, and we're going to squeeze down your arm, across your elbow, all the way down the forearm, like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. What we're doing is we're kind of giving ourselves a lymphatic squeeze. And then once you get down to the hand, think of making that direction, going toward that goal, setting that boundary, and we're going to go keeping the heart present. I'm going to do the other side. Squeeze. Ha. Other side again. Breathing, letting the heart be present. Feeling the heart. See if you can feel the heartbeat as you're doing this. Ha. A little bit faster. Just gliding the hand down. Ha. Faster. Progressively faster. Ha. 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 Staying there for a moment. Bringing the hands to the chest. And now, just very gently breathing, gentle breath. Letting ourselves feel whatever we are feeling. And I invite you to contemplate this definition of power over the week. Power, letting go of my need to control and manifesting the creativity of my wild woman or wild man, whichever applies to you or both. I'm very happy to speak. If you have any questions, please send me a message or write a comment, or remember to like and share this if you like it. And I look very forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you next week.